Welcome to everybody to another webinar arranged by GMI. Let me check if I have really full control, and I try to move the page. Yes, I have full control. Yeah, today I'm here with William. As said, I'm in Italy, while William is in UK. Just a short presentation about ourselves. I'm Mauros, he's director of GMI. I'm having 30-year experience in automation, specifically in safety, functional safety and intrinsic safety. And I'm entering now in the world of cyber security, which is a different kind of safety, but we will see interconnection with functional safety, for example. We are here with William. It's today our guest speaker. William is a very expert in cybersecurity. He has many years of working experience in automation, and since 2003 he is working in the improving control system protection against a cyber attack. Can I say this, William? Yeah. And well, thank you very much, William, for sharing your knowledge with us, GMI, and with the participant to our webinar. This is one of the many webinars we are arranging, and we are touching different kind of subject, from functional safety to cyber security to intrinsic safety, and we are touching also other aspects in terms of application of our product. Before to leave the speech to William, I would like to give you just a very short presentation. It will not be too long, but it's due, as GMI is sponsoring this webinar and is providing valuable information, valuable technical information. We would like to tell you who we are. So we are a company which is specialized in safety, either in functional safety or intrinsic safety, and now we are approaching also the world of cybersecurity. We are designing and manufacturing a field interface in many industrial sectors like oil and gas, chemical, pharmaceutical, and so on and so on. You find our equipment in DCS, ESD packages, fire and gas, BMS, and so on and so on. We have many years experience in our field. We have full production here in Italy, from where I'm talking. But we are, of course, a global player. We are present with several offices worldwide. Where we do not have our office, we have our partner, distributor, or agent. And just because we were talking about safety, we are, even in this COVID time, of course, we are doing that online. We are executing a lot of training in functional safety. And very soon we will also be able to do the same with intrinsic safety and cybersecurity training. You can follow up in our website, and we can provide you further information and detailed information. Just few words about us. Of course, since we are dealing with safety, meaning life of personal, environment, and so on, the quality is one of the most important things we are focused in. Our equipment are fully tested before to leave the factory, and we are we believe to be so safe with our quality that we release as standard 5 years warranty on our product. Of course, being present worldwide, we have several kinds of certification, quality certification, as well as certification that allows our product to be installed worldwide. So I'm sure you will find the certification for your country within the range we hold. This is a very short, before to leave the speech to William, very short overview of the product that we deliver, we design, ranging from intrinsic safe to loop indicator. I want to tell you, I will not go through each one of these bullets, but just to inform you that you will receive this presentation. So you have, if you have any curiosity, you will have later on the chance to contact us, and we will be glad to support you, to provide you information. You will also have the possibility to watch this presentation later on our YouTube channel. Okay, this is going to be registered, and you will get that on our YouTube channel, as well all the other presentation that we webinar that we have done in the past and we will do in the future. You just follow up for future webinars. We have several subjects and arguments. And what to say? Today there is not foreseen the possibility for you to raise question verbally, but you have a kind of a question and answer box which you can use to provide your question. Do question, no problem. I will work as a moderator and I will interrupt William in case it is necessary to provide to answer to any of your questions. Very last topic or point. At the end of this short presentation, this short webinar, we will have a short presentation or a short set of pages where we have collected question and answer during registration or during previous webinars. So we will answer to that in addition to the question that you will raise. So this is a list of typical customer of GMI. As said, I'm not going too much in detail. You will have the chance to go through the presentation if you are interested later on. And I leave now the speech to William. And thanks again, William, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Okay, thank you very much, Mauro.
Sorry, I went one page.
You want to page
too much? Yes. Now you have the full control. Sorry for that.
Let's make sure I've got control back. Yes, we got control. Thank you very much. Okay, that's a good introduction. Thank you. The webinar today, we're going to follow on a little bit from the webinar that you will have attended a couple of weeks, 3 weeks ago now, I believe. And also you may have seen earlier this year. So we're just going to take the same ideas and just explore it a little bit deeper. And then also, in case you haven't seen those previous webinars, we'll link it back as well. And so hopefully that gives you just a little bit of a wider appreciation. And while discussing with Mauro and GMI what the subject of this presentation would be, we thought, well, perhaps actually one of the big problems out there is there's a lot of information and a lot of ideas. But also we're starting to see some, let's say, quite common misconceptions and pitfalls coming through. So perhaps, and this is what we're going to do, we're going to explore some of probably the more important misconceptions that there are out there at the moment, and you know, use that maybe as opportunity for highlighting where these are and where the opportunities may be for some training and help with what you're doing. So just before we go diving right in at the deep end, let's just go and remind ourselves where we've started. And we've started really in this item called risk. And you know, background of GMI and a lot of people on this webinar, you know, the risk in the safety is something that you guys are absolutely expert in. Risk is a measure of human injury, environmental damage, economic loss, in terms of both the incident likelihood and the magnitudes of the loss of injury. However, when it comes to security, one of the very first questions is, what is security risk? And we explored this a lot more detail in the last webinar. We will touch on it again today. We have this risk is an expression of the likelihood. Again, we've got this likelihood thing coming through, defined as a threat. Someone malicious will exploit a specific vulnerability in your industrial control system or your safety system, or a combination of targets causing a consequent and other related impacts. So you can see the similarities really coming through in terms of these definitions. But the key thing is that in the security, we have a person with a malicious intent intending to cause damage to your system, as opposed to the traditional safety view where something may happen due to some statistical or random process. Okay, so these are the key terms that we need here is threat and vulnerability, and we'll be seeing those as we go through the webinar, and we will be linking a lot of things to these terms, threat and vulnerability. It's really important. Even on the courses, we spend time to make sure people can understand and work with the differences between what is a threat and what is a vulnerability. Okay. The other thing that we touched on in the last webinar, and is really important, I think, for today's webinar, is this concept of zones and conduits. I would, this is just Will Horner putting up his hand and saying, from my personal experience, but I would say about 80% of the work that I get involved with, there isn't really a problem in the risk. There isn't really a problem in the approach. The problem stems out of the fact that we haven't defined our zones and conduits particularly well. And once we have established zones and conduits and we fix some of the misconceptions and we've worked with them and worked through them with yourselves, then a lot of the problems start to solve themselves a lot easier. So if you're coming up against hard problems with the cybersecurity, just take a step back and say, oh, Will said maybe we ought to look at our zones and conduits and see if we've got them defined in the right places. If you get in conflicts and things don't seem to work, that may very well be the case. So bring this up now, because again, as we go through this webinar, we are going to link back to this concept and see it in action and what it can do for you. So this brings us to the very first of the misconceptions. We're going to look at 3 today. There are many more, unfortunately, but I've picked out probably the 3 most common. The very first misconception is that the industrial control system is isolated. I would be a very rich man if I got £1 or €1 for every single person who at the start of the engagement said, well, we're fine, our control system is isolated. Many, and particularly, and this is probably more important, there's many managers walking around believing that too. And therein lies the root, particularly as you go further up the organization, you get towards your board level where these decisions are made. Why aren't they funding? They think they're fine because it's isolated. So what's the problem? Well, the problem is it's rare. I think in my travels, I have only ever once accepted that an industrial control system was genuinely isolated. And I think I was then later proven wrong about a year later when the extra wire was actually found, when they actually did get hit. So even if you think you are isolated and you genuinely believe you're isolated and you're prepared to argue with me that you're isolated, just take a step back and just remember that I'm probably coming from a position that even when I have accepted it, they've then got being hit with by a cybersecurity incident. So the truth is the IT systems, your business IT systems and the industrial control systems cannot operate in isolations from each other. They can't. The reason is we have the modern digital business. In fact, I see many companies now with digital programs. What do the digital programs rely on? Data out of the industrial control systems. Accountancy, operations, recipes, inventory tracking, engineering, maintenance, remote system support. These COVID times, I've seen a lot of that taking place, remote system support. That means there's a connection there somewhere. And of course, one of the biggest almost contradictions in the security is that you actually need your system to be connected to get your system secure with all the updates and bits and pieces that need to take place. So just even the systems that have then said we're going to isolate ourselves, they then come back 3 months later and say, how do we get our security updates onto the system we're isolated? It's a bit of a dilemma. So there's the reality check. If you hear this term isolated, please correct it. Your systems are probably not isolated. And let's go and have now a look at what this really means. And this is where we go back to the previous webinar. The risk, we said earlier, is expression the likelihood that a threat will exploit a specific vulnerability. Okay, we have a threat source, a person, a malicious person who wants to cause damage to your system. And we will have that system, the end system, with a vulnerability in it. And in the middle there, we have a threat vector. That's the technical mechanism through which the attacker is going to attack your system. Okay, and one of the biggest issues that we have is when people are walking around saying our systems are isolated, they are automatically in that statement not disregarding a whole series of vectors through which their system may get attacked, and in so doing, basically leaving the vulnerabilities exposed. And that's why this misconception is particularly dangerous, is that these vectors are there, and it doesn't matter how you hook the wires together and what systems you put in place to limit the movement of, or how you think it might be working. The reality is if there's a connection there, there's a vector there of some form or another. Okay, and then just sort of taking this one step further so that we really start to see this in context. What actually happens in practice is that you say, okay, we're isolated, we're not connected to the internet, therefore we are safe, but you're connected to something. And what we actually see the threats doing is they link together in a chain. Okay, so the threat source will set up almost like a logistics chain through your system using different vectors to do different hops to get to their final target, your industrial control system probably. Okay, direct access is not required and direct connectivity is not required. So even if you think you are putting a server with extra network cards and then the IO is isolated from the main network, the reality from an attacker's perspective, you've just put a small extra hurdle in for them, but probably not a particularly big hurdle, unfortunately. And so this is what we need to understand is, it doesn't matter how long or how many blocks you put in that chain, that's just another vulnerability waiting to be found for them to hook the attack path back together again. Okay, so from this one, then we will move on and we'll look at our next misconception, which is sort of related in a way. And this is going much more technical now. And so here we focus perhaps on the managers and this concept in the business, our control system, our safety systems are isolated. Now we're going to come to the people who say, we're not isolated, but we've got a DMZ. Okay, so we're safe. And this misconception is actually a technical one, and it comes from the fundamental principle that a little knowledge is dangerous, unfortunately. Okay, this is where going on and seeing what other people are doing is fine, but unless you really have the specialist help telling you the things you really need to know, this is where you can come into a lot of trouble very quickly. Now then, the misconception is that although people correctly understand that you separate your enterprise IT and your control system with one of these DMZ zones, okay, the most common misconception is that the DMZ is a zone sandwiched between two firewalls. So as we can see on the diagram here, I've labeled the firewalls. We can see them very clearly. There's a firewall on the left-hand side in that purple zone in the plant DMZ. I've called it firewall A, and that's the firewall between the enterprise IT and the DMZ. And there on the right-hand side, I've labeled a firewall B, and that's the firewall between the DMZ and industrial control system, the control center and the BPCS in the case of the diagram. so that we get the consistency of the diagram with the previous examples. Okay, but the reality is actually quite different, unfortunately. You know, this idea that from what we can see on paper, which is a DMZ, we've got two firewalls, therefore it's a DMZ, is unfortunately too simplistic. Okay, you know, the DMZ has a lot more design considerations than just implementing two firewalls. So if you are listening into your organization and you're hearing the technical guys saying, we're fine, we've implemented a DMZ, we've got two firewalls, it's sandwiched in the middle, that for me should be a red flag, because actually I'm expecting to see and hear slightly different language. Let's go and have a look. Okay, and we come back to this guy here. The almost is this, I believe this was one of the starting points of the previous webinar. We're going to look at the security requirements differences between IT and OT, or the enterprise IT and the industrial control system. Okay, and we come back to these fundamental problems that the top objective in IT is confidentiality, top objective in OT is availability. I think most people, I believe, on this webinar will be quite familiar with this. And then we come across this term that you keep hearing, and you will be hearing a lot more. It's IT-OT convergence. It's almost like a holy grail of the IT security world, is to achieve this convergence between IT and OT so that everything looks and feels the same and works together. And reality is actually a bit different here. And this is where the DMZ comes in. What we need to say is, yes, in the IT world, we've got the core competencies of the IT security. And in the OT world, we've got the core competencies of the OT security, and they are actually quite a bit different. Some of the technical stuff, you know, behind the scenes in terms of how packets of data move through the networks is actually very similar, and we teach those as the fundamentals. But then what happens after that to secure your system starts to diverge between the two. And what we end up with is this problem that the IT policies, the enterprise IT policies, the security policies, the things that we write down, how we're going to operate, the things that are important to the business are actually quite a bit different with the OT ones, as we can see in this diagram here, and they conflict. Okay, they conflict a lot. Yeah, you know, access controls, how user accounts are specified, shared user accounts on HMIs, physical access. There's some really actually quite fundamental differences in terms of how we want to operate. And yet this doesn't align with the IT policies, and we get this conflict. This is where the DMZ comes in, and this is the DMZ's real job, because what we need to do is we need to implement the DMZ as a transition. Okay, the DMZ is a transition, so everything outside the DMZ, above the DMZ into the IT, is working to your IT policy. Everything below the DMZ, working with the control system, is working to control system policy, and the piece in the middle needs to provide the convergence. If we don't do that, then we're going to have conflict. So if your DMZ is just a DMZ, or is it just a network implemented by the OT guys maybe, or maybe the IT guys, then what you're going to have is you're going to have a cliff edge on one side or the other of the DMZ, and that cliff edge is an invitation for the hackers to find issues and vulnerabilities in your system, because you have not gained that nice smooth transition from IT policy to OT policy. You've met bang, or probably one side of DMZ or the other, maybe even in the middle. You've got the conflicts there, you've got exposure. Okay, and that's the really important thing. And now people then say, okay, so what does that's all great, Will, that's all on paper. What does that look like in policy? Well, what actually looks like is when we take the DMZ and we look at the outer firewall, the firewall to the IT, we look at the inner firewall, the firewall to the OT environment, I would expect them to be actually different, implemented with different configuration in them, different protocols. Why? Well, if something can attack from the IT environment into the DMZ, You don't want it to jump from the DMZ and be able to do a second hop with the same attack vector as it was able, because if you can use the same attack vector, you've got a common mode vulnerability, it'll go all the way through. We'd expect that with user accounts. We'd expect the passwords to be different. Why? Well, someone's phished an IT password in the IT environment for these IT servers. You don't want the same password to be valid down on the control system. You want that separation. If you've got a control system network that needs to be open and can't have access control on it, you don't want it directly exposed to the same vulnerabilities that can attack the IT network. And so we use these pictures and these differences to then explain what the different parts of the DMZ need to do in order to gain that IT-OT convergence and be a good DMZ design for you. That's the difference. It's more than just two firewalls. Okay. So this then brings us on, I believe, into our third misconception. Okay, this is the last one, and we can carry on from many hours talking about misconceptions, unfortunately, but this is the third one that I want to pick out, and this I come to directly as a result of the previous webinar. And this is we're going to risk assess the SIS system, just the safety system. Why do people want to do that? Well, it's actually the requirement, and that's where it comes from. So we have through the 61511, as we saw in the previous webinar, the requirement that the security risk assessment, the SRA, shall be carried out to identify the vulnerabilities in the safety systems, the SIS. And we've got the three references here, which I have copied over. The reality, again, going back to the reality statement, the risk assessment should be part of the wider industrial control system environment, not just the safety systems. Again, why? Well, let's go back to our previous slides, the isolation argument. Well, if you are just risk assessing the safety systems, you're missing the vectors. How are people going to get close to your system? How are you going to prevent them doing that last hop? Yeah. What we have done is we are not looking at the attack path, so we're not controlling the attack paths into the safety system. Okay, what are the attack vectors on the safety system? Well, from a cybersecurity perspective, you've got the obvious ones like, maybe we've got a vulnerability in the firmware. My argument would be there, yeah, great. So what are you going to do about it? Because I might not be able to recertify your safety system for another 6 years because I can't modify it because you're operating. Yeah. So we're going to have to live with it. And then people shudder, we're going to have to live with a vulnerability on our safety system because we can't update it. Yes. How do we deal with that? Well, again, we go back to our vectors. Well, where is the vector actually starting from? Well, perhaps the vector in terms of the vulnerability of the safety system isn't really the important one. You're not really exposed on those networks if you separated them. What else can be going on? Well, maybe somebody can be writing set points into your control system. Maybe somebody can be applying overrides onto your safety system. Maybe somebody could be changing the calibration on the instruments on your safety system. These are also perfectly valid attack vectors, and they are not necessarily in the direct control, and are possibly actually far more risky than the actual firmware in a fault that's in your safety system itself. And so these all need to be part of the overall design of the system. The second problem then comes in here, and we come back to our security level definition. And we mentioned this last time, but we're going to look at it again in the context now of what we've just seen. Here we've got the idea that the threat vectors depend on the motivation level sophistication of the threat source. Okay, are we talking about a nation state? Are we talking about organized crime? Are we talking about a disgruntled employee or a script kiddie? These are different levels of sophistication and they have very different motivations. But the greater the level of sophistication, generally speaking, general terms, the greater the likelihood that the cyber attack is going to be successful. Okay, and so the 62443, which the standard we looked at, and we'll remind ourselves in a minute, defines security levels in terms of 4 different levels, and ranging from casual protection at the top down to essentially nation state actors at SL4. Now then, the problem comes that when people look at these definitions, and let's say we take the SL3, with sophisticated means and moderate resources, you're going to protect against. And then we go and look at what the standard says. They want things like 2-factor authentication as an example. And the immediate response comes back is the safety system won't support 2-factor authentication. So we're stuck. The safety system will only support standard authentication. And the risk assessment then comes grinding to a halt because the risk assessment says I want an SL3 or an SL4, which is quite common on a safety system, but the safety system itself won't support it. And also, even if it did support it, that extra complexity is not welcome because it's going to interact with the reliability of the safety system. And I have seen that take place. How does this work? Well, if we go back to the previous misconception, which is risk assessing just the safety system, then we are going to be limited with our actions to just the safety system. If we look at the wider environment and how those zones are laid out in the wider environment, then what we will see is that we can implement the controls because we can, if we, let's jump back a few slides. Let's get back to this attack path. Okay. Let's say our safety system is down the bottom right here, and we need to implement an SL3. There's no problems in implementing the 2-factor authentication in the remote access to the environment right down on out on the DMZ and control the movement through as you get sensitive, more sensitive. Doesn't matter where you place the control on the attack path, as long as it blocks the whole attack path. And we can use the whole environment to solve the problems and solve the risks of just the safety system. And so that's where this then becomes important. So people actually are causing themselves problems, that they're creating difficulty for themselves. They are limiting the risk assessment to just the safety system because it says that's what they need to do. And they think that's the easiest thing to do because it's a smaller scope and therefore it sounds like it's going to be more sensible and quicker to deliver, but then they get very stuck because they can't actually follow it through and they can't implement the controls and requirements it highlights. So that then brings us back to this guy here, the 62443. It's been, so a few sections of this have been around for a few years. Some of it's a little bit more recent. The risk assessment came out late last year. That's the 6244332 document in the middle there. But the other important document is 6244321, and that sets out the sort of the how to set up a cybersecurity management system. And therein lies a lot of the clues of actually how to solve some of these problems and how to approach it. They really are, actually I found over time an incredibly important, incredibly useful document, both as a implementation tool, but also as a diagnostic tool to work out what's going wrong when people get stuck. So it comes back to this guy here, managing cybersecurity. We had this statement last time and it seems just as relevant this time. If you think technology can solve your security problems, then you don't understand the problems. On the previous slides, none of the 3 issues that we presented were actually technology problems. They were all misconceptions through limited understanding. Perhaps your little bit of information is dangerous, taking some basic actions, maybe not having the full awareness, maybe not having all the organizational structures that you need around to support you. So if you're looking at the technology, please use this slide here as the red flag saying, guys, we're looking for technology solutions. We've got a problem. Yeah, we don't understand the technology. So this is how we bring it back round to how can we help? And actually, I'm going to be cheeky and say in the questions, actually this came through a couple of times. So I'm going to say this is the answer to a couple of the questions that we have seen is how can we help? Well, we can spare in terms of the life cycle support, GMI, not through myself. I'm very much the cyber. There's a lot of expertise through GMI with the 61511. We've also got the expertise as well with the 62443 lifecycle support in terms of the risk assessments, the zone design, requirement specification, setting up your management systems and the security management of your suppliers. Notice they're saying the security management of your suppliers, they don't own your security. Okay, I've seen people try to do that. It doesn't work. And we can also support you with the following virtual and classroom instructor-led training, in that we have the TUV Rhineland competency training program in terms of functional safety. We've also got the equivalents now in terms of the cybersecurity fundamentals and the security risk assessment courses. The security risk assessment course comes as well with the TUV certification. Okay.
Excuse me, William.
Yes, please.
Can I interrupt you because we have a question from one of the participants, and the question is, I read it for you. What level of SL is mostly required in IACS? And what kind of security application are required to achieve those SL1 and SL2?
Okay. The straight answer to the SL question is it depends. Okay, and it depends on the risk assessment, and I'll bring it back. I cannot and will not be drawn into a generalized statement for because for me that is equivalent to asking what still level do I need for my safety system. We have a method and an approach and a process through which we need to follow to make sure that what you are implementing is aligned to the risk for your systems and the business rationale. Okay, that's business rationale is where the safety differs a little bit from the cyber, in that the business rationale drives the process rather than mandatory requirements. In terms of the types of things that are required, the 62443 will list certain things that are at the different security levels, and that is a good reference. That's the 6244333 document. Lists a sort of and makes a good suggestions as to what types of security controls go to the different levels, and then how do you actually implement it in practice. Again, I then go back to my recommendation, which is look at the zones, look at the conduits, look at the attack vectors, look at the risk assessment, and place the controls, the barriers, the cybersecurity technology, the processes, or whatever, in the appropriate places to block those attack vectors. Okay. Again, that goes back to the risk assessment, and the risk assessment will identify where those are.
Okay, William, we have another question. I leave you reading that, please, because I do not want to introduce further misconception. Do you have the chance to read the question? Question answer box.
Let's have a look. Do we really need zero trust architecture for industrial control system cybersecurity? Zero trust architecture, I believe, is a term coming through from one of the vendors, one of the security vendors. It's not something I am hugely familiar with as to what is involved in a zero trust architecture. Okay. I've got problems with that term as zero trust. At some point, you've got to trust people. Okay. Somebody somewhere needs to be trusted. And the problem with zero trust is that you're basically saying, I'm going to put technology solutions in that don't let anybody have any form of autonomy over the system. This is fine in a world where you maybe have some fairly junior guys with fairly major access to fairly major systems across maybe the entire enterprise. But when we come down to the individual plants, and assuming we're talking plant environment here, individual plants, we tend to find actually quite small teams with individuals who have got actually quite high levels of autonomy, quite high levels of control and knowledge, and huge levels of dependency on those individuals. And then sort of implementing something that says, and we don't trust you to do that job, is sort of a contradiction in the from a security to the way that we have behaved with those guys for just about anything else. And that's where I've got a problem with this, because we need to remember we've got individuals and people, and those people are incredibly important in the industrial environment. What we need to do, and I fully agree, is to make sure that we are protected against disgruntled employees, make sure we are and that's more than just technical controls. There's a lot of managerial type stuff there. We need to make sure we are protected against succession type planning. We need to make sure that we are protected against visitors, outsourcing, and all these different types of arrangements. And it comes down again to just defining the set of attack vectors in the risk assessment that are relevant to your environment. If elements of a zero trust architecture help solve some of those problems, then great. But I'm not an advocate of taking something called zero trust architecture and implementing it because that's a best practice. I'm an advocate of saying, look at your environment, design the requirements, design the technology, design the processes, design the team structures, the racing matrices, design all of that to meet the requirements of your environment. That's what I'm an advocate of. Okay.
Okay, thank you, William. I think we are almost at the end of this presentation, correct?
Yes, I believe the next, let's get back onto my presentation. Next, yes, the closing slide.
Okay.
Okay,
So
and then bring up our contact information.
Okay, these are the contact information. So if you need any additional information, you can drop an email on that. Now we have another last section with the question and answer. As said, we collected the question during the process of registration, and we used also some question that we collected in the past webinar. So we are going to go through. Before to do that, so you can close, and I can share.
I stop the share and then hand over to you.
I will share now the presentation. Now we have another question. Yeah, it's on the training on cybersecurity. And the question is, are these both TUV certified that are valid for 5 years? Does one receive the IACS Specialist TUV Rhine cert? So both training we are doing are within the program of TUV, yes?
Yes, they are not both certified. The SRA is certified, but the fundamentals course is a prerequisite for the SRA. So they are the path, they together form the path towards certification. I think that's the key statement there.
it's a kind of prerequisite. Participating to the fundamentals course
Yes.
is a prerequisite to participate to the second one, to the how it's called, the
security risk assessment course. Yes.
And then you get the certification,
Yes,
from TUV.
From the first course, you get a I think it's a letter of I forget the correct technical terms here. You get essentially a letter confirming that you have passed the course and you have received that as essentially as qualification. So you can demonstrate that to your company, to your managers, and your training record that you have attained that and passed it. But you do need to pass that fundamentals course before you can enroll on the SRA course.
Okay, so we can proceed. We are going to the conclusion. We have some few questions which we collected into a short presentation. So let me go through as soon as the system will respond to me. Okay, now it is responding very well. So I read the question for you, William. So the first question is, what role does IACS 62443 have for safety systems? So,
okay. Yeah, the link here is actually comes straight back out of 61511 and was the main subject of the previous webinar, which you can get online, as Mauro has previously said. The security risk assessment requirement shall be carried out to identify security vulnerabilities of the SIS. And the link is that 62443 provides a process through which you can then arrive competently at that risk assessment. So there's 3 parts to that. The first part is the 2009 6244321 document, which I mentioned. I really do like this document. It includes how to do the risk analysis, addressing your risk with the CSMS, and the monitoring and improving. So it's a management system. It's not a set of documents. Maybe that's a misconception slide for the next webinar. The CSMS is not a set of documents. It's a management system. Okay, the 2020 document, the one that came out last year, actually describes the security risk assessment process. That is actually the basis of the SRA TUV course. You will learn a lot of detail in there. And then the third document is the 6244333 document, came out in 2013, and that describes the security levels and how to define those turn that into security requirements for your system.
Good. William, before to go to the next question, we have a question coming up from the participant. It's a long question and is talking about guides, UK. I leave you to read it in order not to introduce misunderstanding.
Yes, so in OG86 guideline, which follows 62443, it certainly does. Are standalone performance standards required on cybersecurity for offshore installations? Well, I'm personally not familiar with the duty holder safety cases for offshore installations. Most of my work's onshore. And I'm not sure what we are looking for in terms of performance standards here.
Okay,
standalone performance standards. I think the confusion. Let's take a step back here and let's solve this from first principles. 62443 sets out a cybersecurity management system and set of processes which you can follow. Okay, those processes work from the basis that your system is risk assessed, and those risk assessments determine the requirements for your system, and the risk assessment requirements are set based on your business rationale. In other words, how your business is defined and its requirements. And so in 62443, and therefore to a large extent OG86, they don't make specific technical recommendations or specific requirements or specific measurement requirements, because every business is different. What they do is they set out the process from which you can get from your business rationale through your risk assessment to the requirements for your installation. Okay, so no, under OG86, I would not expect it to be making specific performance standards. Those are likely to be coming through your sector, not through OG86. Okay, I hope that helps answer that question.
Okay, so let's go to the next question. So the question, William, is, can specialized security software reduce cyber risk, or are human factors still the weakest link?
Okay. Okay, and I think the simplest answer to this question, now I see it in having done the webinar, is just the title on the previous main present webinar, which was common misconceptions, probably actually provides the top level answer to this question. However, let's go look at the detail again. The security tools, they protect against specific known threats and vectors. Okay, so there's no one tool out there that I am aware of or that I'm ever expecting to find, but just based on principles of it, I'm not expecting to ever find any one particular tool that solves all the problems. Oops, can we jump back?
Yes, sorry,
Yeah,
but
so
was
we're
mine.
going forwards rather than back.
Okay, sorry.
This is the one. Okay.
Sorry.
And yes, I put no problems. And so again, yeah, back to security tools, and based on that exact same statement, we can therefore also conclude we're not expecting to find any combination of security tools to ever guarantee that they will protect against all known threats. So please, that's just the silver magical bullet type problem here. If you find people starting to claim that, please hold them accountable for what they're trying to missell. Also, just remember this one, modifying your system, adding in tools. The tools themselves become part of the attack surface of your system. And if you want an example of that, we saw one of that earlier this year with the SolarWinds, where the SolarWinds tool itself actually became the attack vector into the systems. Okay. And then also on top of that, let's remember the tools are the complexity in the system. And therefore you'll have undetected vulnerabilities, and the tools themselves also introduce reliability issues. We are in a webinar here with a whole load of functional safety experts, people who are far more expertise than myself in reliability. Complexity is almost the antonym of reliability, and yet I can certainly share with you, I don't think I think it's safe to share with you that I have been called to installations because they have had a reduction in the reliability of their systems. They've asked me to come in to diagnose what's happening, and the first thing I've done is switched off the security tools because those were the source of their reliability problems. So just really be aware of that. You know, please be careful of the specialized software. Okay. Should we jump on?
Yes, I'm trying to do that. Okay.
Okay, no problem. Oh, we're going backwards again.
So, is this the right question? Sorry, because.
Yeah, just carry on to see where it goes to. Okay, yes.
Okay.
So the common question is, how do 624433, the security levels, relate to 61511 standard and SILs? Okay, so what people, and we've heard that in a question earlier as well, and I'll come through and repeat the same thing again. People often see the security levels, SLs, as having 4 levels, and then they look for a simple way of hooking up the SIL definitions with the security levels and try to jump and miss out the risk assessment. The reality is you're going to fall flat on your face, unfortunately. There is no, and I must underline it, there's no simple relationship between SL and SIL, okay? They have come from the same sort of conceptual thinking in terms of trying to handle the cybersecurity in a similar way to how we have handled functional safety. From that perspective, I'm fully supportive of them because they are giving us a process through which we can understand security, but there's no direct relationship between the two. Okay, so just because we've got the 4 levels in each does not mean to say that they can be mapped to each other. The other one is that it's probably not acceptable to say I'm not doing anything on my safety system. That's starting to become a little bit clearer to people these days. What I will do is I will add in here that this is where security zones come in, and the competent use of zones and looking wider, and that misconception we talked about earlier in terms of just trying to risk assess the safety system. Use the two things together, the wider risk assessment and the security zones, and that will help you then implement security levels in an effective way in your safety system. Okay, we need to keep the complexity out of the safety system. Let's remember, as SL security level goes up towards 4, we are introducing more complexity into the safety system, and that safe complexity may not be welcome, okay, and may contradict your SIL levels. How do we solve that? We take the complexity out and we move it elsewhere where the complexity can be implemented. Okay.
Good. And another easy question: who is responsible for the cyber security? I think this is the last question, maybe.
Yeah, you are is the answer to that, not you, Mauro, but our listeners. The OG86, and we heard that mentioned earlier on the earlier question, and CAF state the responsibility for the cybersecurity sits with the board, i.e. the owner operator. Okay, for me, it's incredibly clear. We do see people trying to hand it off to their suppliers. We do see people trying to hand it off to the vendors. We do see security services being sold where they make it look like they are taking responsibility for the security, but the bottom line is they can't. Why? Because the security is linked to the business rationale. The business rationale is set by your board, not by the vendor. And your board therefore need to have a view of the risk that their business is exposed to, and the cybersecurity is a component of their business risk, and they need to be able to view on that and take the appropriate decisions. They may take a decision to outsource some of the solution to a vendor. They may take a decision to invest in certain items and get a load of people to work on it, but the responsibility remains with the operator of the company, the owner operator. I hope that makes some sense. When you do the security risk assessment course, this will go really see that relationship and why it is and how it influences the risk assessment and how it influences the rest of the approach. And this is where, to a certain extent, the security does differ slightly from the functional safety in that how the business rationale drives the requirements rather than standards. Okay.
Okay, so we are almost at the end. Well, just I would like to first of all to thanks all participants who started in the beginning of this webinar is still with us. That means that William, you did a great job. Thanks for that.
Thank you. I hope it's been useful, everyone.
Yeah, I think so. And now, just for me, it's time to remind that as we are arranging this kind of webinars, we will arrange furthermore, and we are going to cover several topics. Cybersecurity is one of these. Then we have functional safety, we have intrinsic safety, and we have some application of our product like safety relays, which is some time to time is given for granted, but during the webinars we received several questions showing that there is still something to be some gap to be covered, and we are glad to share our knowledge. So you did some question, we collected some question for you, and now we have one question we would like to raise to you, and we would like you to quote, to give you your feedback about this webinar. You will receive, say, the presentation together with the contact name, and we will be glad also to receive some comment on the webinar, because yeah, no, we are always ready to improve ourselves. In the meantime, I saw that we received good feedback. Also, is in the question and answer we received a thanks. So thanks to all of you. I stopped the poll and I share the result, which are, let me say, exciting for us. Thanks for the feedback. And again, thanks to William, and look forward to talk again, to work again, and to share again our knowledge, your knowledge in particular, with our customer. So
thank you very much.
Thank you very much again. Now I'm in difficulties because I have so many windows open. So again, thank you very much, and we look forward to meet you again in some of the future webinars. Thank you again. Thank you, William.
Thank you, everybody. See you again soon.
Bye-bye. Stay safe. Bye-bye.